I haven't done a video on religion in a long time, mostly because everything that needs to be said about it is out there, and much of what I wanted to say at this point about it has been said, and there are plenty of new atheist YouTubers that want to take a stab at it, which you can easily find plenty of them on the Atheist Hub YouTube channel. I'm now more into the network and boring political technicalities to move the movement forward, and don't feel the need to continue arguing about religion. Instead, I'm working on secular politics and communicating science. However, a recent event came up, and while I discussed it before in multiple parts, this sort of culminated one of the darkest and more damaging sides of Christianity. But it only appears if you're raised in it and have had your entire life to think about it, going through your most vulnerable years. Namely the years from 14 to 24, when you're most vulnerable to suicide. Some of you may have heard Pastor Rick Warren, head of the Saddleback Megachurch and author of The Purpose-Driven Life, had a loss of his son committing suicide. It's funny because so often anytime there's a new religious figure in the news, as an atheist your mouth starts watering to find a snarky bit of humor to say about them. And then it took me a second to realize there was nothing funny to say about this. The man was 27 years old, with many years of depression and suicidal thoughts. The article below discussed some of the statements this guy said. He said things like, "Dad, I know I'm going to heaven. Why can't I just die and end this pain?" He had this depression and these thoughts starting at least around 17. While exploiting this for political gain is wrong, I had the exact same experience at that exact age. The depression was massive. Most people in the religion, especially ones converted later in life, or who didn't take it very seriously as a younger person or teen, are just hooked on the idea of how great it is that the greatest person in the universe loves you and made a sacrifice for you. If you only look at the positive side of it in these terms, it's amazing. But if you're growing up believing this wholeheartedly, the situation gets a lot darker. You're conditioned to take it as just a given. It's not nearly as special as for someone who converted as an adult. It's not just about heaven and the love and the gift from God. It's also about the hell, the punishment, and the current suffering in the world. In many branches of conservative Christianity, fixing the world's pain and suffering is hopeless. The earth will all end in a fiery demise anyway, but we're still required to continue to try and fix it. Making things better prolongs the suffering of the planet, because this horrible thing called existence won't end. With increasing population, the longer it lasts, the number of hell-bound people increases exponentially. You know the world is going to keep getting worse and less Christian, and yet you keep struggling to convert and have Christian babies, bringing them into this cesspool of a world. God has you locked in this loop where people have to fall away from God enough, and the world has to go to hell in a handbasket enough before he decides to come back. It's why they are constantly end times sermons, because they constantly see everything political as a sign of the end times, and things getting worse, even though they don't see the trends that things are gradually getting better, just that population is so high, and so much more tragedy occurs, just at a lower rate of percentage of the population in the world. However, they are absolutely correct that the world is getting less Christian, and they have a persecution complex and cry persecution anytime the nation follows the First Amendment. When you've been raised on religion and you strongly believe it, you begin to view the church in a very confusing way. You see people who like materialism, but who claim to believe just like you do. You're told to work hard and go make money. Well, if you truly believe the end is nigh, why the hell are we focusing on money? We should be all out using up and giving up our money to save as many souls as possible. You are viewed as a party pooper or social weirdo when you truly want to live your religion and they don't. Their argument was, well, no one's perfect, best cop out ever. So you're stuck in this limbo, this game God has. You can't be like everyone else in your church because you so fear hell, but you can't get out of the depressing, cynical hole that you view reality in because the empathy you feel around you toward people you know who are suffering, and even worse, good people you know who will burn in agony because you can't reach them. You aren't living. You're acting out the will of someone else. It's all a charade. There's no point. Just wait out the suffering and watch the suffering of people around you as you wait for it to all go to hell in a handbasket. It's Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill. So the end times can come and we can all go to heaven. It's truly a death cult. But most don't think about it enough to realize this logical conclusion. The crippling depression makes living impossible. This needless, non-biological depression, pushed by brainwashing you just take for granted as obvious. Douglas Adams said that for people over 35, new technology is evil. Under 35, it's new and exciting, and if you grew up with it, you take it as obvious. The novelty is non-existent to people raised in it. You know it inside and out intimately. The brain is wired to pay attention only to change. If it's something in the background, you don't really pay attention to it. If you're wearing a watch, at first it feels really weird, and then you adjust to it and don't even notice its existence. And then you take it off, and then you notice that change too. Otherwise, you would be constantly annoyed by everything going on around you. People like this poor guy really only tend to have two outs: suicide, or out of desperation the way I went, looking to sources that I would have otherwise considered satanic. Feeling tortured and suicidal already, you often feel dirty, and maybe God has made you feel abandoned to better infiltrate the enemy and better convince him. So I did, and began to realize the many flaws in my own knowledge and belief. I was also in several towns away from my family, and few friends, so social ties to church were not very entangling to prevent me from stepping into a different mindset as needed. This guy's ties ran incredibly deep, as preacher's son of a megachurch. I'm sure he was prayed over often, assuming he wasn't ignored. Either way, peer pressure probably prevented much free thinking or just non-supernatural critical thinking. I wonder how many other brilliant people suffered or died needlessly from depression like this because they grasped the dark, sadistic, logical conclusion of the religion that most just shallowly glance over and accept because they know they aren't as smart as God. They're just his willing sheep, a vessel to be used in his purpose, in his sick, twisted game.